All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I can see that it's not quite 7 o'clock yet, so we'll get started in another minute or two. Thanks for being here. I'm sure we're going to have some more people joining us. I'm glad everybody was able to find the link and get here. We'll have tons of information for you about fifth grade band and orchestra, so stay tuned. We'll start in another minute. All right, I think we can get started with introductions. My name is Matt Tiganelli. I've been teaching fifth grade band for many years here in Troy. I'd like to introduce my colleagues. Right next to me we have Janie Sorensen. She also teaches fifth grade band. Next to her is Joanna Van Eisinga, fifth grade orchestra, and Isaac Weiss, also fifth grade orchestra. We're very excited that everybody can be here. We're very excited about having our classes in person again and being able to have our classes during the school day at school. It's great to be back and to be seeing the fifth graders. So we'll go ahead with our presentation here. We like to start with this video showing the different groups in Troy. You'll see high school groups, middle school groups, fifth grade groups, just showing kind of what things are like in Troy and what we do and kind of welcoming you to the instrumental music family.
does he spin my head so much?
So as you can see, we have a fantastic program here for instrumental music in Troy from 5th grade all the way up through high school, and we're hoping that your family and your student will be a part of this program for many, many years. We're going to go ahead and get started with some videos of instrument demonstrations. Your students would have seen us demonstrating instruments when they first saw us in school last week and the week before. Talking about the instruments we offer, we'd like to have the families be able to have the opportunity to see what instruments we teach and offer in 5th grade. And we have some videos from some Troy High School students. There will be time for questions at the end, so if you have any questions, just try to keep those in mind, and we'll open up the chat for questions and things like that later on when we get to the end of the presentation. Hopefully we'll answer a lot of questions along the way. So we're going to get started with the string instruments, and I'll turn it over to the orchestra teachers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mr. Weiss. I work with Mrs. Van Eisenga to teach orchestra, which at the 5th grade level is synonymous with the string family. So we have 4 string instruments from highest in pitch to lowest: violin, viola, cello, and bass. And among these, some are played on the shoulder, some are propped up on the ground. There's all different sizes and ranges of pitch, but all of them can be played both by plucking the strings, which is called pizzicato, or with a horsehair bow. And this year in 5th grade, we will be doing both of those things. One important thing to be aware of when it comes to the strings is that they come in different sizes. And by that I mean not just that a violin is smaller than a viola, but also that violins come in 3/4, half, 1/4 sizes. Violas come in different measurements of inches, and so on. So if your 5th grader has elected to play a string instrument this year, or will elect, because we'll be doing a couple more schools tomorrow, then we have measured them for sizing. So on the instrument choice form, which you have or will receive from your 5th grader, it will have marked on it something like violin 3/4 size, or whatever measurement it may be. On the slideshow right here, in the bottom right corner, you can see those are all violins, and those are all 3 different sizes. So whatever personal measurements you've got, there is a size that you can play. Even the smallest kid can play a double bass in orchestra. Now to take a look at some of the individual instruments, one by one, demonstrated by Athens High School students, I'll hand it off to Mrs. Van Eisenga.
So first we're going to hear the violin. The violin is the highest member of the violin family. It's the most famous member. And when you listen to this, listen to the really bright tone quality that we hear from the violin.
Hi guys, I'm Andrew Wang, and I play the violin. I'm a senior at Troy High School, and I actually went to VMIS when I was in 5th grade. Here's a little bit of what the violin sounds like.
So you hear how high the violin can play, especially when we get to advanced technique. Let's move on to the viola. The viola is very similar to the violin, so it often kind of is a hidden gem. A lot of people don't know much about the viola. It is played on the shoulder just like the violin, but it is actually slightly larger and slightly lower. But the other thing to know about the viola is that it has a characteristic mellow and warm sound.
Hi, my name is James Champlin and I go to Troy High School and I play the viola.
So as you can hear, it's a bit lower, but it's got quite a different tone from the violin. As we go lower in the string instrument family, Mr. Weiss will tell us about the next two.
So as I mentioned, the upper strings are played propped up on the shoulder, and now here are the two that are placed on the floor. The cello is only one that has to be played sitting in a chair. It is not large enough to play standing and too small to prop up on your own body. So check out the deep, rich sounds of the cello.
Hi, my name is Lisa and I go to Troy High School and I went to Leonard Elementary School and this is the cello.
And finally, the largest string instruments, the one you have to play standing up, although I again reassure you that even if your fifth grader is small, you can play this one because there are different sizes available. The contrabass, double bass, or string bass, depending on what you prefer to call it.
Hello, my name is Hadra Ahmed and I'm a bass player at the Troy High School Orchestra. I actually started playing bass in 5th grade at Bemis Elementary School, so I hope you guys enjoy my next piece.
Yeah, so strings are pretty cool, but that's far from all the options. Let's introduce you to some of the band instruments now.
Good evening. I am Janie Sorensen, and I'm one of the 5th grade band directors here at Troy. So let's get started with the first family in the band, and that is the woodwind instruments. Now, in 5th grade, we are offering 3 woodwind instruments. That's the flute, the clarinet, and the alto saxophone. So the flute is going to have the highest sound in the band. It's pretty light, pretty soft sounding. Now you can play all of the instruments to be soft or loud, but flute overall is going to give a pretty soft sound, pretty high pitched.
Hi, my name is Hija Eva. I am a current senior at Troy High, and I went to Bemis, and I play the flute, and I'm going to play an excerpt from the Go Bear Fantasy.
One thing to note about the flute is that it kind of makes sound differently than other instruments in the band. So the flute is held off to the right, and there's a piece called the head joint that sits right on the lower lip, or right below the lower lip, and the student or musician will blow air across the hole in the head joint. It feels really similar to blowing air across an empty bottle and creating that foghorn sound. And then you change notes by pressing the keys with your fingers. And clarinet is the next lowest woodwind instrument in 5th grade band. It is played by putting the mouthpiece and a reed, which is a piece of wood, into your mouth, and you kind of just close your lips up around the mouthpiece and blow air through the instrument, and then you change notes again by putting your fingers over the keys and the holes. It's a little bit lower sound than the flute, but it's like a middle high sound, pretty soft as well.
Hi there, my name is Alto Bonazir, I play the B-flat clarinet. I'm a junior, 11th grade at Troy High School, and I've been playing this instrument since 5th grade at Bemis Elementary.
And the last woodwind instrument offered in 5th grade is the alto saxophone. It's played similarly to the clarinet in that there's a mouthpiece and a reed that's put into the musician's mouth, sealed with the lips, and then we put air through that instrument and change notes by using our fingers to press the keys. It's a lower sound than the clarinet, but it's a little bit more pointed.
Hello, so my name is Dennis Yang. I currently go to Troy High School, and I play the alto saxophone. In 5th grade, I went to Marco Elementary School, and I want to demonstrate what the saxophone sounds like.
Things to note about the saxophone before we move on is that it is played with using a neck strap, and that just helps hold the weight of the instrument. And then a few 5th grade students, their hands might be a little small for the saxophone. We'll check that out in class. But if they really want to play saxophone, we may suggest that they stick on clarinet for a year, and then they could try saxophone in middle school. And one more thing to note about band instruments before moving on to the next section is that string instruments come in different sizes, but band instruments do not. So clarinet is just one size, flute is one size, but that really shouldn't pose much of an issue with the exception of the hand size on the saxophone. So I'll pass it off to Mr. Tiganelli for the brass instruments.
Okay, we'll move over to the brass instruments and then percussion as well. We'll start by talking about the different instruments we have in the brass family. So first, you'll see towards the top here is the trumpet and the cornet. The trumpet is the instrument that's a little bit taller, and the cornet's just a little bit shorter. They're very, very similar. They play exactly the same notes. They're played exactly the same way. They're just shaped different, and either instrument is fine for 5th grade, trumpet or cornet. And then we also have the trombone. That's the low brass instrument with the slide. This instrument down here is the baritone. It kind of looks like a tuba, but it's a little bit smaller. And then over here we have the percussion instruments. These are the percussion instruments that the fifth graders would play, and they all come in this rolling case with wheels on it that you can see. So there's two main instruments we play in percussion, the snare drum and the bells, and we'll talk about those when we get into the demonstration video. So let's go ahead and start with the trumpet video.
Hi, I'm Dejas Merlet. I go to Troy High School and I'm a senior. I play the trumpet, and I'm going to play for you an excerpt from American in Paris by George Gershwin.
So as you can hear, the trumpet is the highest sounding brass instrument. We like to have lots and lots of trumpets in our band because it plays the melody almost all the time. And sound is made on a brass instrument by blowing and buzzing your lips into the mouthpiece, and that's how you make sound on any of the brass instruments. We'll move on next to the trombone.
Hi, my name is Danny. I'm a current senior at Troy High School. I play the trombone, and I went to Bemis Elementary School.
So the trombone looks big, but it's really not very heavy, and we show the students how to hold it and be comfortable with it. It's really pretty easy for a fifth grader to maneuver. I've had a lot of parents ask me in the past, is my student's arms long enough? And every student that I have ever had played the trombone had long enough arms. We make it work, we know that they're going to grow, and we don't really even use many of those further slide positions where they're really reaching until they get older towards middle school and things like that. The next instrument is the baritone. This is a larger instrument, and it comes in a big case. It's not able to go on the bus, and it is kind of difficult to bring it to school and then back home for each band class. So what we like to do is we have some baritones that belong to the school district, and we keep a baritone at school for the student to use, and then they would have their own baritone at home for practicing, and they would need to bring it in for our evening concerts. The same is true for the string bass. That's another large instrument that's really too big to go on the bus. So we like to have a bass at school that the student could use during the day for our classes, and then they would have their own at home for practicing and to bring in for concerts. So those are our two bigger instruments that really can't go on the bus because they're so large, the string bass and the baritone. Let's listen to the baritone.
Hi, my name is Miranda Howell. I go to Troy High School, and I went to Morse Elementary, and I play the baritone.
Before we talk about the percussion instruments, I do want to mention that we have some special items and things that we're going to have for students that play woodwind or brass instruments. So if your student plays the flute, they will receive a special flute mask that the district is buying that we will hand out, and it has a slit in each side, and the head joint of the flute will go through the mask, and it absorbs the air to make everything safe. So we are taking special protocols to make sure the fifth graders are safe when they're playing their instruments at school. Flute players will receive a mask. All of the other wind players, so woodwinds and brass, will be receiving a bell cover. It's like a stretchy material that goes over the end of their instrument that keeps the air from getting out into the room. So if they play clarinet or saxophone, that bell cover would go across the bottom of the instrument. Any of the brass instruments, trumpet, trombone, baritone, the bell cover would go over the front of it where the sound comes out to absorb some of that, so we don't have so many things in the air, and so that we're safe while we're playing our instruments. And all those materials, the bell covers and the flute masks, will be provided by the district and passed out from your student's instrumental music teacher. So we can move on to the percussion. And in the previous slide, I showed you a picture, and it had the bells and the snare drum. The bells kind of looks like a metal xylophone. This instrument that this gentleman's playing here is actually the xylophone. It's a little larger, makes a little bit deeper sound. Our students get an instrument that's smaller with metal keys on it, and that's called the bells. So this is really, really similar, but this instrument that you see in the video is something that they would have in middle school or high school.
I play percussion. I go to Troy High, and I'll be playing a melody piece today.
So the bells and the xylophone and really all the other mallet-style instruments, they play the melody, and you could hear that what he was playing sounded like a tune, it sounded like a song, and these instruments are all set up kind of the same way. They have the same order of keys. It's set up a lot like a piano keyboard. So if your student has previous experience on piano, has taken some piano lessons, sometimes that can help with learning to play the bells and to play the mallet instruments, but it's not required. We've had many great percussionists that didn't have any prior experience on piano that did very, very well on bells and xylophone and things like that. I should mention that they are required to play both instruments. All percussionists may play both instruments, must play both instruments, the bells and the snare drum. We're going to take a look at the snare drum next. So we use one main drum in fifth grade band, and that is the snare drum. We also use some other drums that belong to the school at the end of the year, but we spend almost all of our time on the bells and the snare drum, and you saw that picture earlier when I showed you the percussion instruments. So this is the snare drum. If your student played snare drum, they'd get one that's a little bit smaller than this, but it would come with a stand like you see in the picture, and it all folds up and fits in a rolling case that's on wheels.
And now I'll be playing a snare piece.
So as you heard in the video, the snare drum only plays rhythm. It does not play any melodies or tunes. We like to look for students for percussion that have a good sense of pulse, rhythm, and time that really helps our band stay together as we're playing. All right, so we're going to transition to an overview of our curriculum and what to expect this year. Before we move on to this, I do want to mention that many of the fifth graders have met with us. Today we met with a whole lot of fifth graders at several different schools and talked to them about what instrument choice they would be making. We're going to wrap that up in the next day or so, and your student may have already come home with a form that says what instrument they told us they wanted to play. If it's a string instrument, it will include the size that they need. Once that form comes home, you would be able to start shopping for an instrument and getting an instrument for your student. So we'll talk about how to obtain an instrument in a couple more minutes here, but I did want to let you know that that form would be coming home and there would be information about what instrument your student chose. Now, we won't be starting classes with instruments for 2 more weeks. So during the week of September 27th, that will be when your student would need to have an instrument and bring it to school. So we'll mention a couple of things about how our classes are set up here. We'll talk about how to get an instrument, and hopefully that will answer a lot of questions.
So speaking of questions, if you are trying to ask a question in the live chat right now and it's not working, just go ahead and refresh your browser and that feature should be working now. So to overview kind of how our program works and how our classes run, each fifth grader at all of the elementary schools are taking band or orchestra in fifth grade, which is an awesome opportunity. Once they get to sixth grade, they can make the choice to stay or choose another elective, but in fifth grade, each fifth grader will be participating in instrumental music. And classes will meet all year long. So you're not going to opt out of the class at Christmas break or anything. You will be in instrumental music through the whole school year, which really gives you that beginning to end experience. And we do meet during the school day. So it's not an after-school program. Your student will get band or orchestra 2 times each week. It's different days depending on what school your child attends. And they are held the same day each week. So if your student has classes on Monday or Thursday, it will be Monday and Thursday each week. And all fifth graders at each elementary school go to instrumental music at the same time. So all fifth grade classes will go to band and orchestra together, but we split off into different sections. So at one building, I might be teaching the woodwind section of all fifth grade students who play woodwinds. Mr. Tiganelli would be teaching brass and percussion at that school, and then Mr. Weiss and Mrs. Van Eisenga are teaching strings. So they'll all split off into their own instrument families at that time.
Okay, we have kind of what to expect and the materials that you need and things like that on this next slide. So first, we expect the fifth graders to commit to the instrument that they chose for the entire year. It can be very difficult to choose instruments later in the year and trying to get caught up. We don't want to put the fifth graders in a situation that's overwhelming where they've changed instruments and are starting off fresh late in the year when all the other students have been playing and have tons of experience. That's why we've demonstrated the instruments, we've helped them, met with them so that they make an informed decision and pick something that they're going to like. At the very beginning, during the first several weeks, if your student is having some trouble or has some questions, we can help with that. But once we get through the first 3 weeks of instruction, the fifth graders really need to be committed to their instrument and stick with that for the rest of the year. We ask the fifth graders to be prepared for class. That's bringing their instrument, their lesson book, and things like that to class on each class day twice a week. They should be practicing regularly at home. We'll have different kinds of things and assignments and stuff to motivate them to practice. We're looking at having them send us videos on Schoology. We did that last year a lot, and it was really successful, really motivated the students and got them practicing at home. So we're going to have some different exciting things that we'll be doing later this year to encourage regular practice at home. They should be practicing an average of about 15 minutes, 5 days a week. I said to some students, if they're busy and have fewer days that they're available, if you could at least do 3 times a week for 20 minutes, that will make a big difference. But 5 times a week for 15 minutes each time really does make a big difference. We have winter and spring concerts. In February, we'll have a concert with the band and strings together, so all the 5th graders will take turns playing in the band and strings, and we'll have both groups playing back and forth at that winter concert, and that'll be their first performance. We have a separate band and a separate orchestra concert in the spring. That's usually in the end of April or the beginning of May, and that concert features groups from the middle school and the high school, so you'll get to see the older groups and see kind of what lies ahead for these students. We do need the students to have a book. If you rent an instrument, the book comes with it. If you get an instrument from another source, and we'll talk about different ways to get an instrument, you might need to purchase a copy of our book. They do sell them online. The local music stores also carry them. The book that we use for band class, that would be the woodwinds or the brass and percussion, is called Sound Innovations Book 1. And for the orchestra class, they use Essential Elements Book 1. And then at the end of this presentation, I will show a link to a packet that includes all kinds of information about the music stores, the supplies specific to each instrument, everything you need to know, dates, things like that. And that will have a list of all the supplies that are needed broken down for each instrument. And that link will be coming up in a couple more minutes here when we get to the end of the presentation. We have a couple additional items that I want to make sure we mention. We'll have Mrs. Van Isinga come up and talk about this next slide.
So these are just some miscellaneous items that we want to make sure you have a chance to think about. I believe Ms. Sorensen mentioned hand size for saxophone. So if we take a look at your child's hand size when they're filling out their instrument choice forms with us, occasionally we might find someone with very small hands. We usually recommend that they start with clarinet for a year and switch to saxophone the next year. There are a lot of similarities between clarinet and saxophone with the mouthpiece and the way that you play and the way that you use your fingers. If your child has braces, an expander, spacers, anything like that, or will be getting that soon, we recommend that you check in with your orthodontist just to double check that it's not going to be a problem. It usually is not, but it can be good to check in with them. And that's just for any of the wind instruments that you use your mouth to play, the woodwind or brass instruments. We recommend renting usually over purchasing an instrument for a few reasons. And a big one is that instrument repairs are often included when you rent an instrument, and it can help repairs be made quickly. It's also really great to rent an instrument for a couple other reasons. It can be a good financial decision because as your child moves up, maybe most of the programs will have a rent to own or a rent to buy program where eventually you would own the instrument, or you could use your rental equity to purchase an instrument or a nicer instrument in the future, and that can really pay off for you. And with string instruments in particular, since we start with smaller sizes and move up to larger sizes as your child grows, it's a real pain if you have a half-size violin, your child is ready for a 3/4, but you own the half-size violin and now you have to purchase a 3/4 instrument. If you have a rental contract, when your child's ready for that 3/4 size instrument, it's a simple trade-in. It doesn't affect anything else in your contract at all. The last note we want to make is about instruments purchased online or from, we'll say, questionable sources. So we have a lot of information for you in the packet about some great places to get instruments, including the used instrument sale. But a lot of places online sell some instruments, maybe they're sold at a particularly low price. That should be a red flag for you, because there are a lot of instruments from sources that are not reputable out there, that are of poor quality, that break easily, that sound really bad, and that just are going to be a pain for you and could end up costing you more money. If you have an instrument that's not functioning well, that needs to be repaired, it could cost you money to take it to an instrument store and get it fixed. It could end up costing you more money than you actually paid for it, or than it would have been to rent or get a nicer instrument. So in the long run, it can actually not pay off, hence the disposable instruments label. And when you're looking online, if you're shopping for an instrument, you often will see reviews that will say, I'm a music teacher and these instruments are great. But some of those reviews are actually planted. So it's better to look at sources that are trusted. If you like buying things online, or if you want to look at rental programs online, almost all of our recommended instrument dealers who you'll find in our packet can do that and work with you online, but it's really better for making sure your child has an instrument that works properly, that they can make good sounds on and learn well on, and also usually works out better financially for you to go through a reputable dealer or something like the used instrument sale.
Let's talk about how to find the right instrument or from a good source. So a quality instrument is just really going to help ensure success. So those more bargain type instruments, like Mrs. Van Isinga said, they're going to break easier. Sometimes they're just not repairable at all, or they're going to require more repairs in the long run and cost more. But in our packet that was emailed out, and the link will also be at the end of this PowerPoint, we'll have all of the local music shops that we recommend getting an instrument from, and we also will list the recommended brands for each instrument and all of those supplies that we ask you to get as well, in case you're unsure, or if you're going to the used instrument sale, which I'll talk about in a minute. That way you know you're getting a good brand. Also, we would love to talk with you about an instrument you're interested in buying. I've had parents send me links to look over used instrument they found online, so feel free to do that. So renting from a local music company is our number one way to get an instrument. That's what we highly recommend. That way you can move up in string sizes, or if your child needs to switch instruments, we can do that easily as well. And a lot of them offer rent to buy or rent to own programs. That's how I bought my instrument when I was in school. I paid a monthly fee, and then every repair cost was covered when I was renting it, and at the end I owned it, and that's the instrument I still have today. And when you rent an instrument, all of the maintenance supplies and your book will be included as well. We are also having a used instrument sale on September 18th. That's a Saturday. And that information, I think that's in the packet? Yes, that is in the packet as well. You can also borrow from another source. A lot of students have an older sibling or a parent that maybe played the instrument that they're interested in using, or a neighbor or family friend. And we are also very happy to look over those instruments for you. Your student could bring it to school, we'll look at it, send us pictures, just to make sure that it's a quality instrument.
Just a couple quick things to add before we go on to the next part of our presentation. The used instrument sale is this Saturday, as Ms. Sorensen said, and it's right here at Athens High School. It's in the cafeteria from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. So if you're looking for a used instrument, the used instrument sale here at Athens on Saturday is a great place to check that out. I did also want to mention that many of the music stores are offering online rental right now, so you don't even have to go into the store. That what they'll do is you can fill out the information on the music store's website, and you can either have the instruments and the supplies that come with it delivered right to your home, or you can come and pick it up curbside at the store, so you don't have to wait in line. It's kind of a simpler way that takes kind of the waiting and lines and time and stuff like that out of it. So you could order that instrument on a music store's website like Marshall Music or Anderson Music or one of the companies in the packet that we'll have that link to in a minute, and they'll either bring it right to your house or you can go to the store and pick it up. So we have some frequently asked questions. We're hoping that we can answer a lot of the questions that you might have. Classes are held during the day. This is not a program that meets before or after school. The classes are always during the day at the same time, on the same days of the week for the most part. The classes meet all year long. This is a full year program, and the students are expected to be in band and orchestra for the entire year. It's their decision if they want to continue in middle school, and we hope they will, that there's some fabulous opportunities ahead, as you saw in that video from the beginning of this presentation. If your student already plays an instrument, that's great. And if it's an instrument that's in band and orchestra, they can continue to play that instrument if they've already had some experience and taken some lessons. Many students will continue to play the instrument that they play or that they've already played and taken lessons on. Some students will even try another instrument if they're kind of far ahead. And we often have questions about students that have had piano lessons or lessons on instruments that are not offered in band and strings. So I'm talking about instruments like the guitar, piano, drum set, things like that. And those experiences really lend themselves to any instrument. So any kind of lessons that your student would have, and we ask them about any lessons that they have taken, and they filled out a form and gave us some information about that. But any of those instrument lessons, even if they're different instruments than what we have in band and orchestra, that instruction really transfers over well and helps with all of the instruments. There's not really a specific direction that we try to steer anyone in that has previous experience. And of course, your student can take band and orchestra in middle school and high school. We've got some awesome programs here. Troy has been on the best communities for music education list for years and years, and we're just really proud of all the experiences and opportunities that we have here. And there is homework in band and orchestra. That homework is practicing. We talked about the expectation that your student would need to practice regularly each week, like 3 to 5 times a week is really good. 15 or 20 minutes each time they practice is great. At the very beginning, during our first couple of weeks, we won't really have covered a ton yet. So if you find that your student is only practicing for like 5 or 10 minutes at first, they'll learn more and become more experienced, and we'll have more to do. Once we get into the end of October and the beginning of November, they'll be ready to set up a regular practice schedule. And I talked a little bit about the performances. We do 2 performances, one in the wintertime in February, and that is a 5th grade only band and orchestra concert. And then we have our spring concert, which is separate orchestra on one night, and then band on a different night. And we have middle school and high school groups along with those spring performances to show off all the different levels that we have here in Troy. So this is the link to that packet we've been talking about. It does kind of take a while to load. So if you go and put in this website right now, it might take a few minutes or a little while to load because it is a big packet. It's like about 15 pages, and there are ads in the back from all the music stores, and those ads and the photos and things like that kind of loaded up the presentation. So it is a very big file. If it doesn't open right away, you probably didn't do anything wrong. Just wait and it should pop up. So here's the website, bit.ly/Troy2021. So we'll leave this up and we'll put it up again in another minute or two. We have just a couple more things we want to show you, and then we'll put this up in case you missed it. So we do have an Instagram page, and we're showing pictures of what the students have been doing. If you want to check out what's been going on in instrumental music, we have even some information about the different teachers. And if you want to check out our Instagram page, you can see the handle at the bottom there underneath the QR code. And then that QR code would take you right to our Instagram page. So you could scan that code if you want to take a look at what's been going on in class lately. You want to see throughout the year what kinds of things we've been doing. That's a great way to keep up with us. So check out our Instagram page. And we have a couple of thank yous. We'd like to thank the Troy secondary instrumental music teachers. They're so supportive and helpful to our program. I know we have a couple of teachers that are online right now and going to help us with answering questions in the chat. Mr. Joe Havrilla is here. He's our instrumental music coordinator, and we're just so happy to have his support. He's always looking out for us. Of course, we definitely need to thank the Troy High School musicians. They did a fabulous job making those videos and demonstrating their instruments. It just sounded awesome. And we need to also thank Gino Manchilla, our theater manager here. He did a fabulous job making everything run smoothly tonight. So we appreciate everything that everyone was able to contribute to this night and make it work for us. So once again, here's that link to the packet in case you need it again or you missed it. And then we're going to jump on our computers and answer some questions. We'll put the chat up on the screen, and I think Ms. Sorensen's going to kind of verbally respond to questions as we see them. So we'll do our best to answer questions. If you have a very specific question that you aren't able to put in the chat or you don't want to put in the chat, you could also email us, but we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can in the next few minutes. Thank you again for tuning in tonight. We're really excited for your student to get started with their instrument. once again, we'll be having our first classes with instruments during the week of September 27th. So that's 2 weeks from tonight, will be that week that we're getting going with our first classes and really digging in. So we're excited. We know the fifth graders are excited. It's going to be a great year. We're so glad to be back and teaching our instruments in the schools, and this is just such a fantastic opportunity.
Alrighty, so the other teachers are going to hop on the live chat, answer some questions, and we have some of our middle school band and orchestra teachers helping us out as well. I'm going to take a look at the screen and hopefully verbally answer some of your questions. One thing I do want to say is I think I maybe misspoke earlier and said we already emailed out the packet. We did not. We are going to email out the packet along with the recording or a link to the recording of this meeting afterwards. So you will get the packet after this meeting. So if your child picks an instrument that they don't like, or maybe they don't feel very successful with, within the first 3 weeks of our classes starting with instruments, you're welcome to switch. So maybe they start off on clarinet and they're not having a great time. We'll work with them to help them along, but if they're really unhappy, we can help them make the switch to another instrument that they would rather play. That's another reason why we suggest renting an instrument, because that's going to make that switch a little easier in that area as well. But that needs to happen within the first 3 weeks of class. How will performances be conducted with COVID? To be honest, we aren't exactly sure. Right now, we are moving forward as though things will be normal. We are planning our concert dates, which is super exciting, as though they will occur normally, which is hosting them at the high school auditoriums or gyms. And usually we group 3 or 4 schools together. It's by feeder school to the middle school, and have the students perform that way. But we aren't sure what precautions we will need to have in place at the time of the performance. So we will keep you guys updated when we know. So using a school instrument, we only have a few of each instrument available for students to borrow. But if you're in a situation where maybe you need some help obtaining an instrument for your student, just send one of us an email and we will definitely help you getting an instrument. We'll make sure every student is happy with the instrument they have so that they have a great experience, and we will get one for them. But again, they're limited, so we need everyone to rent an instrument or borrow one from another source when possible, but we have a few of each instrument at the school. And then when you're helping your student choose an instrument, if they're stuck between a few instruments, here are just some things I've talked with students with that school. So first, I like to kind of get an idea of what sound they like. Do they like those high sounding instruments, maybe a low sound or something in the middle? You can also consider how an instrument makes sound. If they're stuck between band and strings, you know, those string instruments make sound by plucking the string, pizzicato, or using a bow. And then the band instruments all make sound in different ways. Those brass instruments, you have a mouthpiece sit on your lips and you're creating a buzzing sound, which we practiced doing in class. Percussion, you are using mallet or drumsticks to create sound by hitting your instrument. And the flute is a little different. You blow across the hole. It sits right underneath your lower lip or kind of on your lip. And then the clarinet and saxophone have a reed on the mouthpiece that go into your mouth, and you blow air through the instrument. So they can consider how the instrument makes sound. Is it a high, middle, or low instrument? And what are the other sound characteristics? Is it a pointed sound, a bright sound, a warm sound? And what would they like to hear all the time, because that's what they'll be playing and practicing. Maybe the size of the instrument as well is something to consider. The PPE that we supply for the students, I believe, Matt, flag me down if I'm wrong, but I believe that we'll just be providing one flute mask for the students and one bell cover for the other students. So let me clarify that a little bit. The flute players will get one specialized flute mask as a slit in each side for their head joint, and clarinet, saxophone, trumpet, trombone, and baritone will all get a bell cover. And they will just get one of those provided by the district, but you can wash them to sanitize them.
Ms. Sorensen, you also mentioned that they need to keep the bell covers on. They need to remember to bring the flute mask, and if they don't have them, they won't be able to play.
Yes. One very important thing to know about that PPE for your student is that the bell cover is it's just going to stay on their instrument. So it never needs to come off. They can practice with it on, keep it on their instrument, and the flute mask and the bell covers need to come to school every day they have band class. If they don't have their flute mask or if they don't have their bell cover, they cannot play in class, because that wouldn't be safe. So bell covers and flute masks need to come to school every day that your student has band. What is the difference between band and orchestra? That's a great question. So a good way to remember this is the orchestra in 5th grade are all the string instruments. So that's the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass, the double bass. So those 4 instruments are members of the orchestra. all of them that have strings. And then the band are the other instruments. One way to remember the band instruments are anything that you put your breath into plus percussion. So the flute, clarinet, saxophone, trumpet, trombone, baritone, all require our air to create sound. And then we have percussion as another member of the band family. Doesn't require our air, but it is part of band. And there's not a different size saxophone for 5th grade. So band instruments are just one size. They don't come in different sizes like string instruments. I don't think that there would be much problem with 5th graders playing saxophone. I think we fit most schools for instruments so far, and I've only had 2 of my students that I suggested a different instrument to. And there's a question about, with used instruments, how long have they been used, and do they come with reeds for clarinets and saxophones? That really just depends on where you're getting your used instrument from. If you're renting an instrument from one of those sources, like a local music store that we have in the packet, sometimes those are gently used, and they usually give you at least 1 reed in the case. I think they give you 1 reed in the case. But if you are getting a used instrument from another source, I don't know how used that would be. It depends on what source you get that from. Likely it would not come with the reed, but the used instruments at a music shop would be very gently used. It'd be sanitized, and they always check them over to make sure that they're in great working condition before they rent them out. Alto saxophone can be continued in middle school. All of the instruments that we offer in 5th grade continue into middle school, and then we offer some secondary instruments. So there's some other saxophone, other members of the saxophone family that your student could play, but usually we start those in 7th grade. There's tenor and bari sax, bass clarinet, French horn, tuba, those are brass instruments. Oboe and bassoon are members of the woodwind family. So those are all instruments that a student could transition to in middle school, but the ones we offer in 5th grade will be continued through middle school and high school. In renting an instrument, you keep it as long as you're paying the monthly fee. So if your student is in band in 5th grade and you're renting that instrument, and then you go on to band in 6th grade, you do need to continue renting that instrument through the summer, not only to practice the instrument, but also you're doing this rent-to-own program. So if you stop making payments on the rental program, they're going to stop all the credit you've built going into your account there, and then you'd have to start again in 6th grade. So you'll just keep paying that monthly fee. You'll have that instrument for your student to practice on during the summer, and you will pay that fee as long as your student's in instrumental music, and then if they're in it long enough, you will own the instrument. think we are getting ready to close out the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions or you think of anything afterwards, feel free to send any of the four of us an email. We would be happy to answer that. And thank you so much for coming tonight.